Firstly, a prayer for illumination. God of faithful surprises, throughout the ages you have revealed your love in unexpected ways and places. May we know afresh this day the joy and wonder of your abiding presence as we open the Scriptures to read the stories of our ancestors in faith. Amen. The Bible reading today comes from Luke chapter 19, verses 1 to 10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was just trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd he could not because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." These are the words of the Lord.
One of those people Jesus just seemed to want to hang around with. There's no other way of putting it. The people who spent most of the time with, the people he liked to party with, the people he seemed to lavish attention upon, were the people who were slightly off on their behaviour. Social misfits, deviant portion of the population, those you would not invite to dinner to your place. Zacchaeus fit the bill to the T. For one thing, Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Zacchaeus was rich. And Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. Zacchaeus was not the little guy who sat at the toll booth and actually collected the taxes. He was more like the local mafia boss who managed to buy the contract to collect the taxes. He managed the system. Zacchaeus was on the top of the heap, the guy who skimmed off the top of those who skimmed off the top. Don't mess with Zacchaeus. So when this famous rabbi came to town, people of Jericho thought they could hardly wait to see what was going to happen, to see the preacher give Zacchaeus hell. They thought Jesus was going to get on his soapbox and launch into a protest. The crowd started to gather and they were saying, "Clean up this act, clean him up and run him out of town." The funny thing, Zacchaeus wanted to get a ringside seat. He wanted to see the action. But the street was so packed with people that he could not see. He couldn't get a glimpse of Jesus, for we read that he was too short. Now, most of us have often thought that that meant Zacchaeus was too short. And maybe he was. Interestingly enough, the Greek, the original version that we have of the New Testament, can be translated in both ways. Because Zacchaeus was too short, or because Jesus was too short. Maybe Zacchaeus was 6'2". Maybe Jesus was 4'2". Who knows? What is important is that Zacchaeus was drawn to Jesus this day. Maybe it was curiosity. And we know what curiosity does, doesn't it? Or maybe it was rumours. Rumours that this rabbi liked to hang around with social outcasts. What kind of rabbi would like to swap drinking stories with tax collectors and prostitutes? This he had to see. This was the thing that he came to see, so determined that he climbed up a tree so he could see over the backs of the necks of the people. It was then that Jesus spotted him, dangling there over a limb, looking ridiculous, desperate just to see. Zacchaeus, Jesus says, get down out of that tree and hurry up. I'm coming to your house to spend the night with you. Luke doesn't say whether Zacchaeus climbed down the tree or he fell out of the tree. Maybe he was so astonished by what Jesus said that he literally lost his grip. In any case, that's when things got really quiet all of a sudden. Like the quiet in a church when a preacher says something so unexpected that everybody waits to see what's going to happen next. Like when I said that Jesus was short and not Zacchaeus. At first, the good people of Jericho probably started sniggering up their sleeves. Then, when they realised he did know who Zacchaeus was, they started murmuring to one another. And there was in the crowd that day John McEnroe, the retired tennis player, who says, "You can't be serious." This was no joke. It was a scandal. So what do we learn from this Zacchaeus story? Firstly, why is Zacchaeus named? Why do we know his name? Often the Gospels records people. A certain man had, a woman, a blind man, a crippled person, a such and such. Rarely do we have a name. We have Bartimaeus, we have Zacchaeus. I think Zacchaeus is named for two reasons at least. One is that by using a name, a relationship is formed. Good morning, Zacchaeus, how are you? Rather than, g'day, who are you? What do you want? There's an embrace, there's a relationship. And secondly, Zacchaeus' name means righteous or innocent one. Righteous or innocent one. What? This Roman sympathizer, this person who collected taxes for the Roman government, the occupying military force, is a hidden saint? Is this Luke's way of saying that Jesus comes to the poor, the marginalised, the outcast? Is this, says Luke, where God does God's best work in the margins, in the oppressed, in the excluded, in this outcast, this lowlife, in need of inclusion rather than exclusion? This transformation of Zacchaeus, of inclusiveness, begins when Jesus invites himself to Zacchaeus' place, showing that the rejected and the outcast are most welcome into the presence of God. The outcast and the rejected are welcomed into the presence and household of God. Why is Zacchaeus named? Because his name is the story. Zacchaeus is not a nobody. Another thing we notice about Zacchaeus that he sought to seek Jesus. He wanted to know. He had an itch that needed to be scratched. But we also know that the crowd hindered him. They pushed him out. They made no room for him to connect with Jesus. The crowd closes ranks and says, "No way are you worthy of this God, Jesus, inclusion. You're too bad. You're not worthy. The things you do are bad. You're not like us. How could God possibly love you?" Have we ever felt that? Have we ever heard that said to us? How could God ever possibly love you? Have we ever been unwelcomed? Unwelcomed, is that a word? I think it is, I wrote it. Have you ever had doors or even borders shut on you and said you can't come in? Visas denied. Zacchaeus was transformed. Why? Because he experienced grace when he should have been rejected. Liberation when he should have remained an outcast. He was welcomed when he should have been excluded. He was embraced when he should have been pushed aside and locked out. This is a story of restoration and salvation, here and now, of hospitality, welcome, and inclusion. The ways of Jesus. Why did Zacchaeus want to meet Jesus? We're not told. But we're told that he was persistent and passionate. His heart was seeking. He wanted to know. There was just something about this rabbi that he needed. Maybe he was looking for affirmation, acceptance. Maybe he'd always known rejection, being pushed aside. Maybe he was seeking forgiveness and a new start in life. Maybe he was at the end of his tether, and maybe he was going to do something drastic. He just needed one last hope. Now let's swing our focus back to the actions of Jesus. The first thing we know is that Jesus invited Zacchaeus into his home. And this is where the parable of grace is in action. This is incarnation. This is God enfleshed in Jesus. Sounds like an Advent story, doesn't it? God comes to us and dwells with us in our house, in where we are. As mentioned before, a relationship is formed. A human being, a person, is recognised. Not the title, not the label, not the job, not the colour of their skin, not the skin disease, the leper, the rich man, the poor man, the tax collector. But a name is used. Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your place. Jesus doesn't invite Zacchaeus into his life, but Jesus invites himself into Zacchaeus' life. Zacchaeus could have done a number of things. He could have just walked away. He could have refused to let Jesus come into his house. He could have declared himself, "I'm unworthy. No, you can't. No, I'm not good enough. You know, there's nothing in the fridge. The house is a mess. My life's a mess. You go to the good people, not to the bad people like me." He could have made excuses. He could have missed the opportunity. However, the other thing that Zacchaeus could have done was to respond with haste, joyfully, and says, "Yes, Jesus, come on, have a seat while I prepare lunch." Something happened, something amazing, and the future of Zacchaeus is unknown. Sometimes family and friends act as a crowd. Sometimes our society acts as a crowd to keep us away from hearing the good news. But you know, it's Jesus or God who keeps drawing himself to us, keeps inviting, come into my house, come into your house. Zacchaeus confessed, he realised, he declared, he worshipped and he gave thanks. Zacchaeus was a changed man, a changed person, a new person because of this, a restored person. Something real in his life had connected this day. Remember, there's a famous, well-known passage in Revelation at the end where it says, Jesus says, "Behold, I stand at the door and I knock." Are you opening the door and letting Jesus come in? That's a fairly evangelical sort of statement, but you know what I mean. Do we hear the voice? Do we make opportunity for God to come and dwell with us? Jesus is there knocking. Zacchaeus, come on down. Zacchaeus is saying, Bob, come on down. With all the baggage, with all the history, with all the experiences of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm picked last in the sporting team, etc., etc. God still says to me and to you and to us, open the door. I want to come and have dinner with you. So I asked the question, are you stuck up? Sorry, a tree. I forgot the last line. Are you stuck up? A tree. Are you still sitting up on your tree today? Are you behind the door hearing the knock? I hope we are. Maybe, just maybe, there is a little Zacchaeus in each of us, waiting to respond to the call of Jesus. We reflect upon those words